to return to our example, let's say that the parties to our cross-border contract, who, if you remember, are in Turkey and the UK, have been negotiating the sale of 20,000 pairs of jeans. They're now ready to draw up a written contract, and as part of this process, they've produced a document known as the Heads of Terms. The Heads of Terms are basically a list of the main points of agreement reached at negotiation. For the lawyers acting for the parties, producing the Heads of Terms is the first step towards a full contract, and they'll refer to them as a guide as a full contract is being drafted. In our Heads of Terms, imagine the parties have agreed that the seller will deliver the jeans to the buyer in 4 equal consignments. Each consignment of 5,000 pairs of jeans will be delivered 3 months after the previous one. The reason for this is the UK retailer operates a just-in-time business model. That literally means that the buyer wants the goods to arrive just in time, just exactly when they're needed and not before, to save money on things like storage space and insurance costs. It's considered to be an efficient way of doing things that started in Japan and is now very common in both the UK and the USA.
Now let's think about the payment clause in this agreement. It says that the buyer will pay for each of the 4 consignments separately and only after they've been delivered. This clause will also give us information such as how many days the buyer has before it has to pay for each consignment of goods. This could be 14 days, 30 days, or maybe even 60 or 90 days. When do the parties begin to count those days? Well, time often starts to run from the date stated in the seller's invoice, but actually it's a matter for commercial negotiation. And the parties can agree on more or less whatever they want to. There's also the question of what happens if any of the 4 payments due under the contract are late. Is late payment a good enough reason, in your opinion, for termination of the contract? Or is there some other penalty that the seller can include in the contract to help persuade the buyer to pay on time? How about a payment of interest on the unpaid amount? And that raises the question of what percentage of interest is acceptable to both parties. Another clause we have to consider concerns the legal ownership of the goods. Ask yourself this: at what point on their journey from Istanbul to the UK do the jeans become the legal property of the buyer? When exactly does the seller stop owning them? Is it when they're put onto the ship in Turkey, ready for transportation to the UK? Is it upon delivery to the buyer? Or is it perhaps only when the buyer has paid for them? Again, this is a matter for commercial negotiation between the parties. But if the seller insists on keeping legal ownership of the jeans until it's received payment in full, this will be expressed in the retention of title clause.